Good morning, everybody. We're here with Jeremy Haynes from Akron, Ohio. Jeremy, you want to introduce yourself?
What's going on, everybody? My name's Jeremy. As Ben said, I'm from Akron, Ohio. I currently reside in Miami Beach. I run a personality development company, digital agency, if you will. And talking about boy Ben today.
All right, thanks, man. So let's jump right into it. Question number one. What is your story?
Good question. All right, so let's see. Where do I start? All right, so I was born up in Akron, Ohio. It was a really shitty place. Like it was really negative. I was really chop at your knees, like cutthroat environment. Meaning, the people that work there, like my family, my peers' family, everybody was working in like a factory, like a really low wage job. So people were in, I don't know, like $30,000, $40,000 a year, but they were cool with it. Like if somebody made 50K, watch out. you know. So can you imagine being raised in that kind of environment? I mean, as an entrepreneur, everybody can relate to the fact that environment's very critical to your success. And that was one of my first lessons when I was younger. Is just that nothing made sense to me, and I learned everything the hard way. And I learned very quickly that my environment sucked where I was, so I knew I wanted to get out. At 16, I started out my first company. It was video production. I started doing music videos for some friends, and then that led to another friend, and then that led to somebody I didn't know, and then somebody else I didn't know, and then started getting paid for it, and then that led to like commercial businesses calling me, and it was crazy. I banked $60,000 in 3 months
Wow.
in Ohio, and all of a sudden, all my parents, friends, and my parents themselves, and like everybody, they were trying to tell me I had to go to school, and like I had to do this and that, and I was like, guys. Yo, I just made more than everybody. Like, you guys can't tell me what to do, man. Come on. So that was kind of tough for me. I was really low key about it. Honestly, like, I didn't tell anybody that when I was growing up because I felt like it was a threat. I felt like I don't know. And so I felt like it was going to be bad if I told people. But anyway, I knew I needed people skills. So I put people in management positions in my video production company, and so I took a hit financially because come time I was like 17 and a half and I was graduating high school. Like I said, I knew I needed people skills and like real life was about to hit. So I got into a sales job actually. So I was DirecTV, and in the sales job, you're probably like, well, Jeremy, why'd you step down from being an entrepreneur? Well, I really didn't. That company still runs today, and I still make money on it. But it wasn't gonna be enough to get me out of Ohio because I didn't have enough resources. I didn't know enough. There was no mentors. There was nobody I could reach out to. I mean, the internet was popping, but I didn't know about education online yet. Like, I didn't have the resources that we have today. So I felt very hopeless, if you will. And like I said, I got into the sales job. I was so good at the sales job that they laid down a sheet of 13 cities in front of me and told me I get to pick a city to go to.
Wow.
And at the time, Tallahassee was like the best looking one. I was going to go there. And all of a sudden, Denver popped up. I had family in Colorado Springs, which is about an hour south of Denver.
Hmm.
And I chose to go out there. So DirecTV moved me out to Denver. Shout out to them. And that was sweet. But to be 100% transparent, in Denver, I sucked at DirecTV. Like, Denver was a very intellectual society. It was, to be quite frank, all white people. It was just weird. It wasn't my normal environment, and I had 18 years of Ohio conditioning. So I quickly became like exposed to the fact that I had to overcome a ton of stuff that was like ingrained into me that I was learning the hard way. It wasn't the right way to think. And I kind of worked into a relationship with the guys in the cell phone kiosk, and I ended up transferring positions from DirecTV into the cell phone kiosk. So this is kind of a turning point in the story, because this is where I learned more. I made a little more money than I was making, and I was still in sales, right?
Hmm.
And in Denver, I'll be very transparent once again. Weed became legal that year,
Wow.
so everybody and their mama's cousin in Denver was smoking weed, like in public. I mean, everybody, like, it was cool. But I wasn't too into it. I mean, I'd smoke occasionally, and it really slowed me down, to be honest. So that's what I noticed about myself. I've always been very fast. I've been very uppity, very very just quick with my response time and like the way that I like to move and the way I like to get things done. And everybody in Denver was very slow, very, very, very slow, very, very, very slow. To the point where if you speak this fast, somebody would tell you to stop and slow down and say it again, and that they didn't understand you. So it really sucked. It was a beautiful place, beautiful mountains, beautiful city. A lot of money being thrown back into the city from all the money they were making from the weed. And anyway, I had an old buddy move out from Ohio that needed saved. He was one of the people who couldn't really do shit themselves. And so I pulled him out of the trenches and allowed him to live with me out in Colorado. And that buddy that came out had gone to Miami for 3 days. And he loved it so much that he decided to tell me that he loved it that much. And, he wanted me to risk moving down there. And, in reality, he was so weak that he couldn't move down there himself because he couldn't survive on his own. He's a follower type. And, he needed my leadership, whether he knows that or not. So we moved to Miami.
Wow.
Dude, it was sweet. I moved down here with $125. That's it. I sat on a suitcase for like a month and a half in my living room. I was on the cusp of Overtown. Anybody's familiar with Overtown? Overtown is like it's like the shooting grounds for First 48. It's rough. And I was still in Costco at the time in the cell phone kiosk. That's how I transferred down here to prove my to prove my income, if you would have moved into my apartment that I was in. And I moved out of the Costco position in cell phones when I met a guy, and he was in Costco. He was walking around. He was a business owner. And I sold him a phone, and he just liked who I was so much. He liked my background that he asked me to come into his company, and I became his head of marketing. It was sick. I believe I was 19 at the time, or maybe early 20s, and the gentleman, his name is Peter Stein. Peter reached out to me, like I said, in Costco. He brought me into his company, put me as head of marketing, and I did a ton of stuff. Like, he threw me into a bunch of stuff that I didn't really know of. He brought me back into the marketing side of business and really got me reinvigorated in what I love to do, which was like control and manage people's perspectives on how they perceive a product. And I was doing it at the time through talking to people and kind of manipulating perspective with words, whereas marketing is my passion because the challenge. How can I get in front of somebody digitally to manage that perspective, to have them take an action without them realizing that they're being pushed into that situation for marketing tactics and skill that I was laying down. So that was really fun. It's the moral of the story.
Right.
There came a time where I put my resume out there. Something in my gut just told me I needed to put my resume out. So I did. And, I get a call from this recruiter, and it's a recruiter for Grant Cardone. And I'd never heard of Grant. Didn't know who he was, didn't know what he was about. And they said that they needed an email marketing manager and somebody to manage this Infusionsoft account for them, and they had no idea how to use it, and this, that, and the other. Anyway, that could be a long story short, but what happened is that the guy who brought me into his company as his head of marketing comes to me the next day, okay? So I put the resume up, I get a call from a recruiter, and then the next day, my boss comes in, the guy who had hired me for the head of marketing. He's like, Jeremy, I unfortunately got to distribute my company, man. I'm selling it off, and there's not going to be a position for you. The company that's buying us is just buying us for the assets. They're not buying us for the structure. So that being said, I got to let you go, but you got like 3 days. And I'm like, okay. So I just called the recruiter back up, and I'm like, hey, good news. And they were like, sweet, so you can start on Monday? I was like, well, I'd like to interview there, but yeah, guys. And so, I walk into this guy's office I'd never heard of. I Googled him before I showed up. So I Googled Grant Cardone, and I see like how big he is. I see like what he's up to, and I see like who he really is. And I Googled Grant Cardone net worth, and I see $100 million. And I was like, oh shit, okay. Yeah, this looks pretty cool. So I go in and I interview on the following Monday. Got fired on Friday. I interview in Grant's office on Monday, and I could keep this really light. I sit down and I interview with him, and I got the job. And that was cool. But when I go in to interview, the interesting part of this office, it's a beautiful office, very modern. It's right down the road here in Miami. But anyway, when I sit down, there's this old dude sitting across from me in the lobby, and I don't know who he is. He's just rocking a really nice looking suit. He looked European, and he was very old, but not old enough to where he didn't have life in him. He was very energetic. And come to find out, this was a $50 billion man. His name's Daniel Pena. And I was just conversating with him for like 10, 15 minutes before my interview. And he didn't tell me who he was. And I didn't know who he was until I came back to fill my position in Grant's company maybe 3 or 4 days later after I secured the position. And I was watching him on Power Players, which is a show where Grant interviews people like that. So, yeah, anyway, long story short, coming to Grant's office, I'm an email marketing manager, so I managed 150,000 people in a CRM, which is customer relation management system. I trained 25 salespeople in Grant's office for their sales team because they were all using the system. I had no clue how to use it. And then I got in a position where I realized there was no marketing. Like they had nothing, dude. And when I say that, we might all know Grant on this podcast or on this interview here, but what you got to understand is Grant's very salesy. Grant knows how to push, but he doesn't know how to pull. And I say that lightly because people are attracted to him, and people do get pulled into what he does. But that's from these different systems that are in place now. That let's say you hit a landing page and you leave, you're going to be pulled back because there'll be Facebook ads that are dynamically put in front of you based on the fact that you just hit a certain product page and didn't buy it, but you have bought something else. There'll be, Google display targeting ads that'll get put in front of you on 86% of the web pages after you hit a page and don't buy, or after you hit a page and you do buy, now it's time to buy something else. Or if we have your email already collected and you hit one of our sites and you leave, you're going to get an email follow-up right away. Cart abandonment, or just all these things that he wasn't doing that were the little things in marketing that a marketer, an advertiser will know of that make a ton of money. And so I sat back, just having done all that, being in head of marketing for a company, now stepping down in a sense just to email marketing, and my intention was to step back up. So by the time I left that office, there was 453,000 people in the database through not purchasing lists, with purchase lists, and with lists that they had gotten. They were at about 560,000. So stepped in the door, 150,000 people in the database, left with 453,000. Stepped in the door, $40,000 a month coming in, left with an average of $1.8 million a month coming in just through e-commerce. Stepped in, 25 different salespeople, had no clue how to use Infusionsoft. I left, I want to say about maybe a third of them, if I'm being honest, were fluent in Infusionsoft, and those were the people who were the core salespeople who didn't rotate in and out. So I became very self-aware of my skill. I became very self-aware of everything I was doing, which was everything digital. Email marketing, Facebook ads, Google display ads, LinkedIn ads. We would do some Twitter ads occasionally. I would help orient the landing pages. So I would draw out the landing pages on these big whiteboard walls that we had. And then 2 graphic guys would execute all the assets we needed to build the page. And we had 2 web developers that would build the site itself, and then I would market the shit out of it. Eventually we had a digital properties manager come in and, kind of manage us collectively, since we had no leadership and since we were making so much money at a certain point. But to be quite frank, it was very hard for me to make somebody $1.8 to $2.5 million a month off of a product that I saw developed. It was just video courses. It was just a man standing in front of a video camera and articulating the knowledge that he held from the experience that he gained in life. And people were paying $1,000 for 1 year of access to these different videos. I saw people buy a $49 web ticket where we made $800,000 off of one event called Millions on the Phone. And dude, it was nuts. Like, it was just videos. That's it.
That's incredible.
Just fucking videos. and the videos would be turned into audio products, and those would sell for like, I don't know, $10 on the low end for an MP3 of a book, to a high end of like $250 for an audio file for one of these 3.5-hour webinars. And I was a driving force behind training the entire sales team and educating the sales team on where and how they're communicating with people in different parts of the sales stages. I created dynamic email follow-up that would cater messages to people based on where they were in the sales process. I was dishing out, like I said, about maybe $50,000 to $100,000 a month in advertising spend, making back a 4-to-1 return on the lowest. There were days I came in and track ROI and we'd be at a 12-to-1 return. So we'd have a 1,200% return on our investment.
Jeez.
We put $1 in the system, we got $10 to $12 back in some cases. It was sick. But I was only getting paid like 10 to, I think the highest I got paid was about $16,000 in a month one time. So they just kind of jerked around on bonuses and, just like any other business, they obviously want to retain as much financial intake as they can. But it kind of became unethical to a certain point. I don't need to trash any names or go any further on that, but there's got a point where I didn't agree with our current pay structure from how it was manipulated in certain cases when we didn't meet a particular woman's standard on how and what we were doing to acquire said finances. It wasn't very fair to us. So that being said, I made it fair to me, and I stepped out of my position. I started my digital agency, and Grant thankfully supports me. He can't go against me in a sense because he preaches entrepreneurship, and it'd be very hypocritical for him to go against what it is that I've chosen to do. Most of the people in the internal aspect of their company agree with what I've done and see where I've gone and who I've become and the reason why I did what I did. But like I said, there's maybe 1 or 2 people in that organization I don't need to name who don't have the greatest perspective on the action that I took. But nonetheless, fuck them.
Right.
It's not about them, brother. Life is all about you.
Right, moving forward.
I needed to help more people, dude. I was making somebody $1.8 million a month with the help of a digital team, and I recreated the digital team. One of the 2 graphic designers for Grant, who was fired over not tweeting one of the tweets that an advertiser was paying us to tweet for him, got let go, so I hired him immediately. He's my creative director. He ran all of Grant's social mediums, did everything but Grant's videos, which obviously we couldn't do. And he's my creative director. So he does all my graphics. He runs all of my social development for all my clients that we have on board. I'm the advertising director, so I take everything that I already did in Grant's office and I scaled it down to a point where I can do it for several people, monitor everything and put people in positions where they make millions of dollars a month, or in most cases, hundreds of thousands, or in most common cases, tens of thousands of dollars a month, from taking them as a personality, developing a monetization model around it, meaning creating websites, creating funnels, creating email follow-up, creating the marketing automation to take those leads and distribute them to the different digital mediums to target them in real time. I literally recreate the omnipresent advertising model is what I call it for each one of my personality brand clients. And I drive a lot of revenue, sales, and leads into these personalities' businesses. Now, one other asset I have in my company was one of the salespeople for Grant. Her name's Sheila, and Sheila's my VP of sales, and Sheila is in a position where, oh, she actually called my, that was weird. she was in a position where she looks over my internal communications, so she communicates to all my clients internally, and her responsibility is to bring people from the external part of the world, which is everybody, into our organization. So her responsibility is sales, of course, and communication management. And she's an incredible woman, and she does an incredible job. And I'm really excited to continue developing her role as we go here. But that means that I that's like my core, if you will, of my company, and then I have about 5 other people that are on payroll. Senior copywriters, video production, a lot of different things. But anyway, I went from about $100,000 a year, maybe like. I was probably making like $110,000, $120,000 with Grant and some of the other things I was doing outside of the office. To now, I don't really like to track my personal income, but if I had to gauge it, I'd probably say it's upwards of, I'd probably make maybe $250,000 or $260,000 this year, but I've reinvested all of it into my business. My business will clear about $900,000 in the first year of operation. And I was told by Grant on his show, The Cardone Zone, the day after I left, that I was going to fail in 4 months. So... you know how that goes.
Right.
But yeah, so I went from a little white boy in Ohio, getting just thrown a ton of negative criticism every day of my life on what I could and couldn't do, and blew the factory workers out of the water to move to Denver. And after living in Denver and things got slow, like I said, I got pulled down to Miami and became a head of marketing out of nowhere. Got into Grant's office, became the digital marketing specialist, and was banking a personality brand a couple million a month. And now I do it for everybody else.
That's incredible. So, you kind of talked a lot about, your past and your history and how you got to where you are. But moving forward, what is the one most important thing that you want to accomplish in your lifetime?
I love you saying that. So my mission, our mission is to drive $8 billion in gross revenue by helping our clients help people in ethical digital monetization models. So check this out. I was in Ohio and I had nobody, right? One of the highlights of that story was that Tony Robbins, when I was like 17 years old, randomly popped up on the right-hand side of the YouTube suggested video column. I watched this video called How to Build Self-Confidence by Tony Robbins. And I will never forget that moment, dude. I was surrounded by people who had the shittiest mentalities, who were very negative, who in no way, shape, or form knew how to grow into the people that I wanted to grow into. And out of nowhere, this Tony Robbins guy comes as a support system. He tells me that I can do it, and teaches me how to do it, and gives me actionable tips that I can apply to my life. And I'll never forget that moment, dude. It felt like the help that I needed. I was in a cornered environment where everybody was cutthroat, chopping your knees negative, and there was that one person who helped me get out of that position just by educating me through the internet and changed my life. And then I randomly ended up in Grant's office where I helped a man take a message and spread it to the masses. And we would get testimonials back that would literally say that they changed their own lives just through this online education. And that's what I love to see. I every single day I wake up and do what I do, Ben, because I know that there's people in the world who are trapped in that corner, who have no help, who have no support, who have no system or structure, and need help. And the people that I work with, I mean, I work with the most incredible people that you could ever meet in your life, that if you spoke to and changed your life in a conversation. And to be quite frank, I almost choke up just talking about it, because I know that the message that I spread to the masses for each one of my clients helps so many people. And I see the testimonials, and I love being the driving force behind messages like that. But I have a bigger sense of thinking now, right? So knowing what I just said, now you got to think big picture, okay? Like Uber right now, okay? If Uber bought a fleet of autonomous vehicles right now, like overnight, boom, they just bought them. Okay, 140,000 jobs for Uber drivers just got wiped out. Unemployment just went from like 18% to 33% overnight. That would reverberate into a ton of different industries. But without going into all of that, what would immediately happen is 140,000 different individuals would go from a low skill, set of just driving a car. Okay, they're in like a robotic position, if you will.
Right.
Anything that can be automated or become autonomous is not a skill that humans need to be doing, right? That's why automation is occurring, is because it's supposed to make our lives easier. But what it really does is it reconditions the people that are in those lower skill set positions to have to specialize their skill or get wiped out. And it's as easy as that. And I tie this into what I'm talking about with spreading the messages, because there's about to be some shit that goes down in the world. Right. There's going to be some big change coming really quick. And if 140,000 people get wiped out of the market, I know that with my clients' information that I have, that everything that relates to online education and these, just imagine how desperate these individuals will become when they have to specialize their skill sets almost overnight just to survive, just to pay for their roof above their heads, just to feed their family members. They have to become better. And to become better, you need education. And to have education, you have to have, essentially the resource to find it, which everybody does now, which is the internet. And so my mission is when all these industries get disrupted, and all of these people become unemployed and all of these people have to turn to how they can become better, I'm really excited to be a resource and a source of that information, because there are going to be millions of lives that are changed drastically. The people who have incredible skills will have to get better. People who don't have skills will have to acquire a skill. The
Right.
people who get wiped out of those markets will either transition into something else or they'll just become depressed and give up on life. And I have clients that can cater to each one of those niches for every bit of information that you would need to grow into it or grow better or grow out of it. And I'm really excited for what's to come because that's going to recondition the world, and we're going to see, like I said, a more confident, more skilled version of humans than we currently know and understand. Just imagine all of those robotic humans right now, like all the people of The Walking Dead who might not necessarily be in positions where they're confident in themselves or might not be thinking every day. Can you imagine if every single person in the world thought? Like, I'm not talking to the people that just wake up and are like, oh, I need breakfast. No, I'm talking like the people who get forced in the corner, who have to think of ways out. They know that thinking. It's powerful, dude.
Right.
Not a lot of people choose to think like that every day. And there's going to be a time very quickly where everybody's thinking like that at once. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to be the helping hand on the other side that's helping pull people up.
So, you were saying a lot about how, you want to be the helping hand to help people up. Well, it seems like you had a lot of people that kind of helped you along the way, whether it be Peter, whether it be Daniel, whether it be Tony Robbins. Who do you think would be the biggest mentors in your life?
To be quite frank, from afar, I would 100% say Tony Robbins. He has so much online information that you can't. I could look up anything that I wanted to look up with Tony, and he's going to have an answer for me on, something that could give me a spark or a push or the actual knowledge to help pull me up from wherever I'm at in that position. Up close, dude, no doubt, Grant Cardone. I mean, when I walked into that office, my thinking, keep in mind, I still to this day, I find random things in my thought process that, were conditioned into me from Ohio or from that low level mentality. And I always step out of my way to recondition myself when I find those things. But dude, Grant, I mean, every single day I learn something new. Massive action, communication in high frequency. I could go on and on and on and on about all the different business lessons I've learned from him firsthand. I mean, even when he wouldn't speak, just being observant in his office is a very strong set of lessons that you can pull every single day. I mean, it's an incredible environment, honestly. So Grant and Tony for sure.
Okay, and I have two more questions for you.
Yeah,
The first one is, if you could pass on one piece of advice, what would it be?
That's a really good question. I would tell you to sprint your ass off because every day I freak out because I feel like I don't have enough time. I feel like from the amount of work that I need to do and the level in which I need to operate on after I've reconditioned my thinking to be so big that there's not enough time, and managing your time is your greatest asset. But a lot of people move really slow. A lot of people act like tomorrow's the day to do things that should be done today. A lot of people don't try to maximize and really squeeze in everything that they can do. So one word, it'd be sprint.
Wow. And then I guess the last question would be, is there anything about yourself that I did not ask you about in this interview that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I have a really good piece of advice. So I'm 22, and I'm stepping into a position, like I said, where I'm going to be managing. I will manage $1 million a year business, probably a year and 1 month after my initial operation started. And it's not overwhelming. It's not something that feels out of my reach. It's not something that feels like I can't manage. But one of the greatest lessons that I've ever learned in life, besides having to sprint for the finish, that I'd like to pepper in here, because I feel like you have a very entrepreneurial audience, of course, and they're going to appreciate this. Speed is power, but power is nothing without control. And no matter where you're at, no matter what level you're on, no matter how fast you feel you're moving, power is nothing without control.
That's really
And
powerful.
you really have to understand that. You really have to apply it to your life, because you can obviously relate it with several metaphors. Like, if I go from, driving a Toyota Camry and then I step into a Lamborghini, speed is power, and I'm going to feel that. but the power is nothing without control. And as an unexperienced driver coming from a very low-end vehicle comparatively to a Lamborghini, I'm not going to be able to control the vehicle, but I'll have the speed of the vehicle. And a lot of people misconstrue that. A lot of people try to get into Lamborghinis without being able to control them. A lot of people don't try to work themselves up to be able to manage the power that they're getting. And that's one of my greatest assets that I could give anybody in life is you always have to educate and train yourself every single day. You need to look at yourself like a pro athlete. You need to look at yourself like, what are you doing that bettered yourself in every area of who you are today to allow you to drive your Lamborghini as fast as you want? Because power is nothing without control.
Right. That's fantastic. All right, Jeremy. Well, thank you very much for tuning in today. And thank you to everybody who's listening. I hope you guys could learn something from Jeremy. He has a really great story. So this is Jeremy Haynes from Akron, Ohio. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, man.